We'll just give everybody a few minutes to let the system join them from the waiting room. Gary, you are muted.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone who's continuing to join us. We're going to give everyone just a few minutes so that the system can catch up and admit everyone. So please be patient for just a minute more.
Excuse me.
Thanks everybody who continues to join us. We will get started here in just a moment. Okay, it's about 2 minutes after the hour. We've got a lot of people still logging in. I don't want to waste time. I want to make sure that we utilize our time efficiently. I am Randa McCown. I'm the Director of Affordable Housing for Leading Age Florida. I'm thrilled you all are joining us today to learn about the low-income housing tax credit program and how you may be able to utilize it to enhance your affordable housing efforts across the state of Florida. I'm joined by an amazing panel of experts that I have given up their time and their expertise to come and share their knowledge with you. A few housekeeping items. If you do have a question, we're going to ask that you please put it in the Q&A box for the questions. Please do not use the chat feature for this. It's harder to track with so many attendees. So use the Q&A feature and you'll have an opportunity to have your questions answered in between each panelist. And then as time allows, we will also have a few minutes at the very end of everyone's presentation for you to hopefully get to more questions. And any that we're not able to get to during the actual time that we're together, we will do our very best to go through them in the transcript and have the panel of experts answer them and send out to all the registrants. So with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator. Janet Stringfellow is the president and CEO of the Volunteers of America of Florida. Now, I have a bio I can read for her, but honestly, she's just too dynamic for me to put them into these little tiny boxed words. She does everything. She literally has experience, and I feel like every single aspect of everything from housing to mental health crises. She's been a rehab counselor. She has been with the Volunteers of America of Florida since, if I recall, 1998. Is that right, Janet? And she is still going strong. She's one of my favorite people. She is bilingual in bilingual in English and Spanish, which makes her an even greater asset in the world that we're dealing with housing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janet, and she's going to introduce our panelists, and we're going to go from there. So thanks, everybody.
Well, welcome and happy Thursday. We're so excited, and I cannot thank you enough for this effort. You worked very hard, and I hope that you enjoyed the harvest of what we're about to share today. Our spirit and our goal is to share with you the wisdom and the lessons that some of us learned the hard way, and hopefully on record time. So this is going to be, I believe, a great teaser for you to want to learn more and hear the part two.
Before you go on, I'm going to launch the poll question for everyone
Yes.
to start answering while you continue.
Absolutely. Thank you. You're going to have a poll question about what type of entity you're representing today, so feel free to do so. As I was saying, we all understand how critical it is to increase our state's affordable housing inventory. So that's why this webinar today is so crucial for all of us as developers or service providers. I have to share that we have a stellar group of professionals as panelists that will share very valuable information from different angles and perspectives. So please grab your pen or grab your phone and your note app, because I do believe you're going to have a lot of great notes to take and knowledge to share with the rest of your professionals in your organization. So each of our panelists are going to present for approximately 20 minutes, and then we will open for discussions or question and answers for approximately 5 minutes. If there are questions that exceeded the 5 minutes at the moment, be patient. It might not happen between the speakers, but they will be handled as time permits at the end of the presentation. Okay, so keep those questions close to you too. Our first panelist and presenter is Marisa Button. Marisa is representing multifamily development programs from the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. This is a key partner, if not the key partner, to make tax credits happen. Marisa was named the Managing Director of Multifamily Programs for Florida Housing Finance Corporation in 2019. She is responsible for the oversight of the rule development, allocations, underwriting, closing, and cost certification processes for the low-income housing tax credit that includes sale, MMRB, and grants programs. Marisa joined Florida Housing in 2016 as an Assistant General Counsel, having previously served in the same capacity for the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation and the Florida Department of Health. So imagine the scope of her knowledge. Before relocating to Florida in 2013, Marisa was in private law practice in York, Pennsylvania. Marisa, I have to tell you, is very talented and humble, as I have learned. So I'm sure that you're going to really enjoy all that knowledge from a very nice person. Marisa, thank you.
How kind, Janet. Thank you so much. And I am so pleased to be with you all today. Now, bear with me. I'm going to share my screen to get the presentation going. And so hopefully that is going to start to happen here. This was the wrong one, of course. We're never doing things the exact perfect way here. So at Florida Housing, we're always doing our best. And what I am going to do is start the slideshow here and get going. So here we go. Oh, and I'm so sorry. Can you see my screen?
We can see a portion of it, Marissa. It seems like the ratio is off.
That is so strange. All right, I'm going to try that again. And we did practice this beforehand. So now I'm assuming you all can see the screen.
Mhm.
We can see the screen with the thumbnails on the left.
Okay, great. Then all I need to do is make sure that I can access that. There we go. Here we go. It should be starting now from the beginning. All right, everybody, with all that suspense, is it starting?
It did not work.
There you go.
Is it working
Team
now?
effort.
All right. Well, great. So with all that excitement, thank you, everyone. I am Marisa Button. I'm the Managing Director of Multifamily Programs, and I'm so pleased to be with folks here and thank Leading Age for putting this together. We are always excited at Florida Housing Finance Corporation to spread the word about our programs and talk more about all of the awesome things that we're doing and the awesome resources that we have available, including the low-income housing tax credit, to offer folks to be able to finance, exactly what it is they're looking to make happen with regard to affordable housing. So the So the topics that I'm going to talk about is some background on Florida Housing Finance Corporation itself. So for those of you who don't know, a little bit more about what we do, the funding opportunities that we offer, which of course the subject of this session is the low-income housing tax credit, but we do offer additional financing products as well. And often those are used in conjunction with the low-income housing tax credit to really maximize the financial feasibility for developments. And I'll talk a little bit about the Catalyst program and the pre-development loan program, which are two great programs that are administered through Florida Housing Finance Corporation for organizations that are just getting started and looking at available resources to start the affordable housing finance journey. And then, of course, some questions or comments at the appropriate time. So for reference, when we talk about the affordable housing approach for the state of Florida and how Florida Housing Finance Corporation fits in, we are really thought of as we are the state housing finance agency. We are the bank for almost all federal, including the low-income housing tax credit program, and state, which is predominantly with regard to multifamily finance, the SAIL program. We are the bank for those resources that we put out in different ways and offer up either through competitive or non-competitive application processes to applicant developers who are interested in building affordable housing. So we are the bank. We are the ones that are endowed with that through the state of Florida, through legislation that controls us. We are a public corporation, so we are not a state agency. We are sometimes described as a quasi-state agency because we are administering state resources, and there are certain aspects of the state that we fall under, but ultimately we are a public corporation governed by a 9-member board of directors that are appointed by the executive office of the governor and confirmed by the Senate. So we've got that interplay. We are public in that capacity. And so we are administering public resources. And the reason that we're not a state agency, or I should say a benefit of us not being technically a state agency, is that we're able to be really nimble and in our financing efforts. So we're able to move dollars quickly. We are able to react to market changes and fluctuations very quickly as a financial institution, but we really still have that important public scrutiny and oversight component as well too. So if you can't tell, I love working at Florida Housing because we just do the coolest things. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about overall Florida's affordable housing approach. So the goal is that we are providing the opportunity for a continuum of housing, focusing on assisting those individuals with the greatest need. So how do we do that in terms of the allocation of resources, including the tax credits from Florida Housing? We are looking at a 3-year rental market needs study that is performed by, and I say 3 years, it's done every 3 years, that is performed by the Schimberg Center for Housing Studies housed within the University of Florida Rinker School. The rental market needs study tells us where the greatest need is throughout the state of Florida. Florida, as you all know, is a very broad and diverse state, having different needs in different types of geographic locations, from the very urban to the extremely rural. So we are looking at overall those that have the greatest need for affordable housing in terms of where there are cost-burdened individuals in the state of Florida. And what that really means is they are spending more than 40% of their income on their housing expenses. So in that context, we are also looking at the private sector as the primary delivery system to produce that affordable housing that we are financing for those individuals with the greatest need. And so we are looking at public-private partnerships, and that includes nonprofit applicants and for-profit applicants. And so we work with a lot of different stakeholders in the administration of our resources. And we also know, and this is, I think, important to a lot of folks in that are tuning in today, that preservation of existing affordable housing is also incredibly important throughout the state of Florida. Developments that were built years ago, perhaps with HUD financing. How do we preserve those, be a part of the preservation of those units so that they maintain affordability and they maintain the appropriate aspects of what you want a development to be in current days. So we have preservation as a really big part of that. And then we also have new housing. Of course, we're looking at the production of new units throughout the state of Florida. There's a tremendous need. More people are moving to our state every day. I feel like I hear the number, it just gets bigger and bigger. And so with that comes the need for affordability. And we are looking at our programs as flexible and that they really consider regional and local needs. So it's not a one size fits all approach. And the low income housing tax credit, that was really a form of equity that's going into a development. And you're going to hear more about the technicalities of that, the low income housing tax credit through some of the other speakers today. But when we look at other products that the legislature may appropriate to Florida Housing to administer for development resources, we're generally looking at those in terms of loans rather than grants, because we're getting those loans repaid at some point, and then we're able to deploy them again into the system. And so that really is like an overview of the approach. We have many different programs that we administer, and so I'm going to just hit on a few of them. The low-income housing tax credit program. I'll talk a little bit more about how we administer that. There's two forms of that tax credit. And then we have our loan program, the State Department Incentive Loan Program. And we do have some programs that are grants that serve persons with special needs. We have our Home Investment Partnership Program. And that program is really targeted to our rural locations of the state, small counties, USDA rural development areas. So that is another program that we administer. We have our National Housing Trust Fund resources. Those are federal resources that are utilized to basically ensure deep targeting of low-income units within overall general occupancy RFAs, which I'll talk more about. I get a little alphabet soupish here and there, as you can see all the acronyms, but the National Housing Trust Fund program ensures us that we get some of those units that are set aside at or below 22% area median income. So that's a very specific portion of that program. And then we have our tax exempt bond program. We are a conduit issuer of local bonds, and we are, as well as many other local housing finance agencies. And those are used in conjunction with non-competitive 4% low-income housing tax credits and often our sale loan program. So the big thing for all of these programs is that each one, whether it is a federal program or a state program, has required affordability set-aside commitments. So you're coming to Florida Housing because you want the funding to build a 50-unit development in your area. In exchange for that, in a very big picture way of looking at it, you are agreeing to Florida Housing with whatever resource that is, that you will set aside the units in that development at or below a specific area median income, and that you will abide by rent limits that are associated with those area median income levels as well. And so, and that you will do that for an extended period of time. So all of these programs, for the most part, require at least 30-year, and in some cases a 50-year affordability period. Because again, we're interested in preserving the units that are being set aside as well. So with regard to how we go about doing that, how does the money get out? If Florida Housing is the bank, how do we get the funding out? How do you apply for the funding? We allocate the federal and state funding, and they are usually, most of all those resources I just showed you, most of them are competitively awarded through the term you heard me mention earlier, requests for applications, RFAs. They are what you would think of as just a competitive solicitation. We also have a non-competitive, as mentioned here in the last bullet point, a non-competitive 4% tax credit and bond program that's through an open non-competitive allocation process. And some of the other speakers may talk about how do you decide what's right for you in terms of the type of development you're looking at and interested in developing. But what's interesting right now, because we are very oversubscribed, so we have many more applicants for our funding than we do the amount of funding to put out there. Hence, many of the resources, it's competitive. Right now, our non-competitive program that should be open through a rolling basis in a non-competitive application is actually closed because we are oversubscribed with our bond allocation, which is a key component of getting those 4% credits. So that just goes to show how very competitive, even though it's a non-competitive process for those resources, we are fully subscribed at this point. So we're in the process of looking at making sure when we do open up the non-competitive process that we're doing the highest and best use of the funds that we're going to be putting out there. So it's an exciting time for us at Florida Housing in that regard. The RFA itself, because I think what I'd like you to walk away with is an understanding of, if I really think I have got a deal that I want to be competitive and I can apply for those 9% low-income housing tax credits, you know, what is everything else that goes into that? Well, you have to apply for those 9% low-income housing tax credits through the RFA process. We have about 15 to 18 of those RFAs each year. And we look at it sort of, we call it a cycle. It runs essentially after the conclusion of legislative session in July through the following year, June 30th. We used to, if there are those of you on the line who are familiar with Florida Housing, but maybe have not paid attention or been involved with developing affordable housing in the past 10 years or so, prior to 2013, we utilized a all-in-one singular application cycle, one-size-fits-all approach. And what we realized is with our resources, we have the ability to take a very nuanced look at what the needs are in different geographic areas of the state. And with regard to servicing specific demographics, whether it's an elderly demographic with a preservation development, whether it's a persons for special needs development serving individuals with developmental disabilities, whether it's a commercial farm worker development. These are some of the different things we get a nuanced approach to look at through this RFA process. And it allows us to have really a faster reaction time to changes that may happen in the market or sudden issues that may come up. So we have an example there with Hurricane Michael that made landfall in 2018. And we had the first RFA for those resources issued in February 2019. And we did that through our home program because it was always targeted towards rural areas. And of course, Hurricane Michael being on the panhandle really fit in with what that resource was looking for to begin with. And then subsequent to that, we also got additional state resources allocated through the rental recovery loan program for Hurricane Michael recovery. But that is a component of how we're able to be really flexible through the RFA process. And right now, we are looking at what we will be workshopping actually in the next couple of weeks, the rental recovery loan program for the impacts from Hurricanes Ian and Nicole. And that there was $90 million appropriated to Florida Housing to administer an RFA competitive solicitation for new development in those hurricane impacted areas. So if you're in one of those areas, that's definitely something you're going to want to pay attention to. And before I conclude, I'll talk about how you access information on our website and follow those things. So that's really what an RFA is. It is the request for applications. It tells the interested parties what it is that Florida Housing is looking for to determine whether or not a development suits what we're looking for the funding resource. So what are we looking for in funding selection? Because we do this RFA process, the things that are very important are things like the location of your development. We have certain RFAs that are targeted towards specific locations. So for instance, with regard to the 9% tax credit, we have an RFA every year that we do for Miami-Dade County. We are looking for developments that come in that specific location. We also have, I mentioned, the home RFA, and currently we will be making awards for that RFA. We again took a look at specific hurricane impacted counties, so location was important for that. So you need to know, where am I located? What do I want to accomplish? And what types of different RFAs might Florida Housing have to suit where I am located? Because if you are in Osceola County, the Miami-Dade 9% RFA is not going to work for you, right? The next thing that's really important is the demographics that you are looking to serve. If we have a goal to do, some RFAs, we did this year for the first time a sale preservation RFA for the preservation of existing developments serving the elderly demographic. So that's really important, the demographic that you are looking to serve, or you may have an existing development that needs those resources. You're going to score well if you're giving Florida Housing what it's looking for in terms of its funding selection process. With our sale dollars, we are always looking to do a certain number of developments that have the family demographic. And so the demographics are certainly important for the residents that you're intending to serve. And what goes along with that is also the affordability set asides and what you're looking at. And I'll talk a little bit about that more as well. But something else that's relative to both the location and the demographic is your proposed development site needs to have proximity to forms of transportation and certain community services. So for instance, in our 9% housing tax credit RFAs, if you're serving the elderly demographic, one of the community services will ask for proximity location to is how close you are to a pharmacy. And the closer you are, the more points you get for that. And, you know, we look at with the family demographic, we look at schools as one of the community services we look at for scoring. And so we have a matrix. It's not huge, but there are certain community services that will get you more points relative to how close to that service that you are. And same with transportation, whether it's a public bus transfer stop or if you're on a public bus line, depending on the location of the development, we're going to look at transportation more in those larger counties. If you're in a rural location, it's going to be less important because there's just not as much public transportation. So knowing what you're close to and the development is a place that folks want to live, that's really important. It's also important if you're a development that is existing and looking for resources for rehab to preserve the affordability and preserve and you know do the things you need to do with upgrades, that if you have challenges to meeting the requirements of our RFAs for proximity, that's something that you communicate to Florida Housing about. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, about how folks interact with us in terms of stakeholder engagement. But we also look at leveraging other financial resources. And I think some of the other speakers are also going to talk about this as well too. We want to maximize the amount of dollars that go out to the, that we're getting the most units for the most dollars. So with that being said, you know, those are the really important things. The first things you're going to want to do for your first steps to follow us, I mentioned, is signing up for our listserv, and this information will all be available to you. But if you get on our listserv, you'll start getting emails about when our workshops are held for stakeholder engagement and all of those important things. And the other things you'll get to find about on our website is our Catalyst program that provides training and technical assistance to organizations. And it's really those first beginnings. We work with the Florida Housing Coalition. They're a great partner in providing that technical assistance if you're just getting started. And then the last two things I'll say is the pre-development loan program, and our is a huge program if you're just getting started. This is a loan program for the pre-development costs to your development. I'm going to show the list there. These are the kind of things that the pre-development loan program will cover. So it feels like that went really fast. I was trying to explain a lot, but I'm happy to take any questions. And with that, I'll go back to you, Janet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marisa. And you did a great job trying to compress so much valuable information in 20 minutes. So thank you for doing that. That was a tough job, I understand. Anyone who has a burning question, if not, we can address them at the end of our webinar. Okay, I don't see any hands up, so we will continue. Our next panelist, I should warn you, have a very powerful journey from different perspective of the affordable housing development world. His name is Darren Smith. He's the president of Smith and Hensey Affordable Group. His presentation includes a great zoom in into the core of the journey of tax credits opportunities. Darren leads Smith and Hensey Southeast and Midwest operations in all aspects of development, with over 30 low-income housing tax credit development in Florida. Darren has grown Smith and Hensey to one of the top affordable housing development firms in the state. Since the inception of Smith and Hensey in 2014, he has led the financing and development of 1.6 billion with B of housing, with over 1,800 units currently in the portfolio and another 1,800 in developments in Florida. The Smith and Hensey Florida office focuses on development and ownership opportunities, often working to bring its nonprofit and public housing authority partners, which is a critical part of this journey, and to turn those visions into life. Darren, interesting enough, grew up in public housing and therefore is particularly committed to the redevelopment and preservation of public housing sites across the United States. His firsthand experience living in affordable housing fuels his drive to redevelop the most blighted communities and provide quality affordable housing to the families who need it most. Before starting Smith and Hensey, Darren worked in city's municipal securities division and specialized in community reinvestment related business. His background, as you can see right now, the picture behind him is a teaser of the quality and the scope of the affordable housing projects that he embarks to. And he also came to me recommended by Juana Mejia, which is going to be one of our panelists. But if you know Juana, she is a great seal of confidence. If she recommends you someone, you know is good. So Darren, we're all yours.
Thank you, Janet. Let me share my screen here. Is it sharing?
Not yet.
Okay, hold on, let me try one more time.
As we all have learned, technology is always a mystery, especially when you're dealing with the twilight zone. So bear with us. But I have seen him happening in the Academy Awards. So if it happens to us, it should be okay.
Yeah,
Darren,
we'll
in
get
worst
it.
case scenario, I can run it from my end and you can just tell me when to advance the slides. I know that's not ideal, but is an option.
Okay, give me 30 more seconds here to figure this out.
There you go.
All right, good deal.
Perfect. Thank you for your patience. Well, first and foremost, Janet, thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Darren Smith. I'm the principal of Smith and Hensey, originally from New York City. I actually moved to Florida in 2010. I was a banker doing a lot of transactions, tax credit transactions prior to starting Smith and Hensey in 2014. When we started the company, really our vision was working with nonprofits, both church-based entities, nonprofits, and public housing authorities to help renovate and preserve the most blighted stock in our state. So today, what I'm going to do is give you a glimpse of the background, the process that we go through with our nonprofit partners to identify what the problems are, one, two, to develop an action plan, and then three, I'm going to give you a glimpse of how these deals kind of pencil out in paper. So let's just start right here. So do you have an asset problem? I assume many of the audience currently property managers, owners of existing Section 8 properties, could be 202s, could be 236s. And the question is, do you have deferred maintenance? And if you do, how do you address that deferred maintenance? In addition to that, do you have vacant land? And if you have that, how do you address that? How do you activate those sites? Well, today we're going to walk through a little bit of the steps on how to do that. So what are your options currently? So let's just stay in the context of having an existing asset. You could do a couple of things. The first thing you can do is you can refinance. You could refinance with a HUD loan. Depending on the scope of the rehab, it could be a 221D4, it could be a 223F, but you can go ahead and refinance for capital upgrades. And I'm going to get into a little bit of the different financing options and how you look into it, but certainly a refinancing is there. You can either choose to do that in addition to with adding LIHTC to the property, going from having tax credits, and it really just depends on how much deferred maintenance you have. The second option is you can sell or transfer ownership, and there's been quite a few not-for-profits in our state that have been selling their existing assets. The ones that don't, maintain status quo and really want our mission base and want to keep these assets in their portfolio, and more importantly, want to continue to take care of the tenants, the residents. A lot of these residents are elderly residents, and you want to be able to continue to effectuate their lives for the better. The last thing you can do is add units. We have certain situations where non-for-profits have an existing building, and adjacent to that building or part of the parcel of the building, there's more density you can add. And we've been able in the past to add density. We're actually closing on a transaction with Juana Mejia and her non-for-profit organization next month, where we're adding 150 units to an existing PrAC 202 site. So there's a lot of opportunities. We love to analyze each and every opportunity with non-for-profits and then come up with a laundry list of items or wish list items that we could address. Decisions should be made. So from an existing property perspective, decisions should be made on three things. Effectively, one, your deferred maintenance. What's the condition of the property? A lot of times these properties are 40, 50 years old, and you really haven't done much, specifically because you have a 202 HUD loan or a 236 HUD loan in place, and you don't really put second loans on these properties. So you basically address through a Band-Aid approach every year, deferred maintenance based on your cash flow. A lot of not-for-profits want to do this anyway because they don't want the cash flow to go into residual receipts. So you effectively, a lot of times, the major systems in these buildings come 40, 50 years need to be upgraded. And unfortunately, you can't do that with just cash flow. You need to do a refinance. You need to add another source of financing, could be tax credits to the equation to help you do that, okay? So the first and foremost you have to figure out is what's the condition of the building, what's the cost to bring it up to current code, because you want to do that as well for your tenants. Next is the owner mission. Do these buildings fit within your owner mission still? If you're a property manager, they probably do. But some organizations feel as if that these properties or the residents don't fit within their main mission, church-based mission, and they often sell. So owner mission is a second thing. And the last thing is financial stability. A lot of these projects, because you don't generate cash flow, because the cash flow is trapped in residual receipts, your financial stability, these projects are break even at best. And so you have to understand and figure out, well, what can we do, one, to address deferred maintenance, but two, while addressing deferred maintenance, how do we stabilize our finances? And we're going to get into that a little bit more. So the benefits of financing. So let's just say of those three items, you decided, listen, we're mission-based. We want to keep this asset. We want to keep it going for another 40, 50 years. And so we're going to opt to refinance. And you could refinance with a HUD loan. You could refinance with a HUD loan with tax credits. There's a slew of options, okay? So what are the benefits of doing this? The first thing is when you refinance, you never want to do a piecemeal approach. You want to refinance in a way where you're addressing all of the deferred maintenance of a project up front. Because what you don't want to do is have a situation where maybe you address a couple of systems. Let's say you address windows, roofs, and elevators. But then 8 years down the line, your pipes start to burst or break or leak. And now you have to put on a second mortgage to address that. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to address every major system of the building up front so that in the span of 20 years, one, you don't have that much deferred maintenance that you need to address, which allows you to effectively generate more cash flow. And another benefit of refinancing is you could refinance a structure where cash flow is not trapped in residual receipts and you're actually able to generate cash flow. And that's second thing, financial stability. So by doing the renovation and by structuring it in a way where you can generate cash flow, what you're able to do is really smooth line operations. A lot of times the largest, other than insurance and payroll, I would say the largest OpEx is maintenance. And so if you can reduce that maintenance through a renovation, or you could reduce your utility bills because you're going to do a renovation that's very energy efficient, that's going to help the financial stability of the property, but also of the organization. And then the last benefit of refinancing is that you can generate developer fees, and again, you can develop cash flow. So effectively, when you refinance, you want to focus on three things. You want to focus on doing all deferred maintenance up front, not piecemeal. You want to focus on financially stabilizing the property or organization. And then lastly, you want to be able to do that through earning a development fee and generating cash flow. So strategies to implement, to maximize refinancing and restructuring benefits. So when we start to work with non-for-profits, we start pretty simply by looking at, okay, what are the benefits? What are we trying to address here in this refinancing? As we said, we're going to address the deferred maintenance. But another element, and this is top of the line, is operating efficiency. We want to make the operations more efficient. A lot of times these projects, when we receive their financials, like I said before, break even. It's not an efficient operation. So what we try to do is, first and foremost, try to make the operations more efficient in a way where you can generate cash flow and the NOI can support permanent financing, permanent debt. So how do we do that? The first thing that we look for is markup to market. From our renovation, and a lot of times in 202 programs and 236 programs, we're able to apply for a Chapter 15 markup to market. What that allows us to do is increase your rents. So increasing your top line revenue helps increase your NOI, helps to make your operation more efficient. And we typically do this through a very extensive renovation. As I said, we're going to do everything up front. We're not going to piecemeal it. So when we submit our package to HUD for the markup to market, we're going to say, HUD, we should generate $300-$400 more per month, per unit on the rents because we're doing X, Y, and Z, and we're increasing the marketability and the lifespan of the building. And so we've been very successful in getting market to markets, for instance, close to $400 to $500 increases per unit per month. And that really helps helps stabilize the operations. Staffing. A lot of times you have a lot of staff, in particular maintenance, because you're constantly addressing the maintenance issues of the building. Well, when we do a large full-scale renovation, you start to look at your maintenance staff, and you don't need as much maintenance staff as you would have if the building wasn't renovated in a comprehensive manner like we're doing with this refinancing. Your management fees. A lot of times your management fees go up because of the market to market. So if you're property managing an asset and we receive a $500 increase per unit per month, well, your percentage of management fee is going to stay the same, and effectively your gross potential rent's going to go up. So that's actually going to help the organization generate more management fees. Energy savings, this is a big one. As Marissa alluded to at Florida Housing, they have programs that that we can tap into to really access more money to help with these renovations. By doing that, we also commit to energy savings. We commit to having all Energy Star appliances in the building. We also focus on impact windows in South Florida or properties located on the coast. That helps with the insulation. So when we do these renovations, we're really looking to not only address deferred maintenance, but we're looking to address deferred maintenance in a way that's going to generate energy savings for us, which is helpful because if you're paying all the utilities in the building, which a lot of these buildings you do, there's no utility allowances, those energy savings, effectively generate more cash flow. So you want to make sure that you have a very efficient building, and you want to make sure that you have a building that has all the major systems upgraded to last for another 20 to 30 years without having to do a major overhaul again. Accounting costs. A lot of times, specifically as it relates to the pracs, you have a lot of small properties, 40, 50 unit properties. And so what we try to do is if we're going to do a renovation to pracs, we're going to bundle up 2 or 3 or 4 into one deal. And what that allows us to do is spread out our accounting costs across 4 to 5 deals. So instead of doing 4 to 5 tax returns and 4 to 5 audits, we're only doing 1. So that helps with the accounting costs. It's a great way also to help streamline your NOI, because every prac has a different rent schedule. So some pracs have a higher rent schedule. You want to combine with pracs that have a lower rent schedule to help smooth out the operations. That's social services. So what we typically do with our non-for-profit clients is we also generate some sort of cash out. When we refinance a building with tax credits, we typically enable our non-for-profits to receive some equity when we close on the financing. And that equity, usually for not-for-profit partners, goes to further their mission, further their social services, specifically with our church-related entities. So social services is another benefit on restructuring. Insurance is a big one. Right now, I'm sure everyone on this call is experiencing extreme increases in their insurance premiums. Year over year, it's almost 30%. And so how do you address that? Well, in renovations, we address that, for instance, we just finished a property in Jacksonville Beach where we effectively added all fire sprinklers to the building and into the units. And that, in essence, helps reduce insurance. In addition to that, impact windows. In a renovation, we're looking for impact windows. We're looking for new roof systems, TPO roof systems. All these elements in the renovation can help. From a security perspective, with cameras, So really when we're looking at the renovation and when we're looking at refinancing, we're looking at, what are ways to help bring down that insurance. And then lastly, as I said before, we're looking to address deferred maintenance items, really with resilient materials that are going to last a long time and effectively going to lower your maintenance. So we're looking at flooring like luxury vinyl tile that are very thick that won't need to be replaced. We're looking at adding quality countertops, solid stone, so that you don't have to replace the countertops. So we're really looking at doing a renovation by adding a lot of resilient materials that are going to lead to low maintenance costs in the future. So as they say, it takes a village. And if you're going to pursue a refinance of tax credits, it definitely takes a village. You have a lot of players involved. I would say the global concept when thinking about developing your team, because you will need a team. Rest assured, this is something that you can't do by yourself. You'll need a team. The two key concepts that I look for are, one, local municipality knowledge. So is your team aware of Florida housing programs, for instance, also state and city programs? Secondly, experience. How experienced is your team at doing a renovation or at using tax credits? At doing a major rehab with tenants in place. So you have to consider these two elements when thinking about your teammates. And it all starts usually with a financial consultant or a lawyer. You want to be able to have representation there for your benefit. You want to be able to have someone that you can lean to for opinions, and that can give you solid opinions because of the breadth of knowledge and experience within this market. Later, you'll hear from Gary Cohen. He's an attorney, for instance, that has a ton of experience and working with both for-profits and nonprofits. You want to be able to have vendors that have the experience. On the general contractor and architect, typically what you do first is you find your financial consultant and your lawyer, and the next thing you want to do is find a developer, somebody who has the experience and has the balance sheet to get these deals done. These tax credit deals require a lot of guarantees. A lot of church entities and non-for-profits and housing authorities aren't comfortable providing the guarantees, or maybe don't have the means to. So you really want to find a joint developer partner that, one, has the balance sheet to provide the guarantees, two, has a great track record of winning deals at Florida housing's competitive level, and three, has extensive experience working with non-for-profits and doing rehabs. So those are the three important things. And once you develop, once you build that JV relationship, then the next steps would be to find the financing. And once you find the financing, really to then find the architect and general contractor to get the job done. The architect is very important as well, because you could be dealing with fair housing issues. You can be dealing with ADA, Section 504 issues. They need to be aware of those issues in addition to what Florida Housing wants to see at a competitive level. Florida Housing in their RFAs has a laundry list of specific design elements that they want to see in a building. And if you mess up, if the architect misses one, it's going to impact the deal. So you want to make sure your architect has sufficient experience with Florida Housing and their Exhibit B, which basically has all of their design elements they want to see. So selective financing structure. I created this grid, and this grid is for purposes of outlining three different approaches you can take when you go to refinance your property. Okay, starting from left to right, you see HUD loan. The middle, you see 9% tax credits, and on the right, you see 4% tax credits. It's important to note that Florida Housing no longer has a 9% tax credit round for preservation assets. It's only for new construction. They did, but I'm still going to go through it because you never know. Marissa could one day decide to have it again. So if she does, then I'm going to go through it so that everyone's aware of how we look at it. Okay. So the first thing to account for when determining what's the best refinancing structure is your deferred maintenance. If you told me, Darren, I have a Prac that's only 15 years old, and every major system in the building is still new, doesn't need to be replaced. I just need $20,000, $30,000 a door of rehab. I would tell you then, you know what, if that's the case, then you probably don't need tax credits. You probably just need to pursue a HUD loan, okay? Now, with the costs increasing in our state, 20, 30 doesn't really get you much. But like I said before, if you have a small rehab need, then a HUD loan probably is the best bet. On the 9% side and the 4% side, really it's for more substantial rehabs. And I would say 4% side now, I had 35 to 60,000. It's probably more like 60 to 75,000 right now. And the 9% side is probably up to 100,000 based on where costs are and effectively right now. But so effectively, the 9%, if you have a large rehab need, the 9% is the way to go. Right now, we're still doing large rehabs with 4% credits. We just have to get creative. We're taking a 4% credit and we're combining it with a sale loan from Florida Housing. You can receive a sale loan up to approximately $2.5 million, and that kind of helps you get there with a markup to market. Okay, but it all starts on your deferred maintenance. And the summary here is if you have medium to large need, deferred maintenance, most likely you need to look at executing a tax credit transaction with your refinancing. Second is your HUD balance, your HUD loan balance. If your HUD loan balance is large, let's just say hypothetically you had a 202 and you prepaid the 202 loan, and now you have a 223F loan on the property. Well, in order for us to refinance the building, you got to pay off the loan. Well, the larger the loan, the less money you can put into the rehab because you're putting more into the payoff of the loan. So when you're looking at your loan balance, if you're telling me, Darren, I have a 202 that's still in existence and it's a small HUD loan balance, well, that gives us a lot of flexibility to do more rehab or to effectively, choose a HUD loan. And you told me, Darren, I have a large loan balance because we prepaid the HUD loan 10 years ago or 8 years ago or 5 years ago. Then I would tell you most likely we need to look at tax credits because not only do we have to pay off the loan, there are prepayment penalties associated with prepaying the loan, and all that does is take money away from the rehab. So we need to find another place, another source of funds. Tax credit's a great vehicle to do that. Your organizational risk exposure. On a HUD loan, it's all non-recourse, okay? So you don't provide any personal guarantees. On a tax credit side, it's very risk exposure. I mean, effectively, you're providing lender guarantees and tax credit guarantees. From my experience, most non-for-profits are uncomfortable providing this level of guarantees, which is the reason why they're bringing a for-profit partner who provides the personal guarantees. And these guarantees can run for 15 years on the tax credit side. So these aren't just, I would say low-risk guarantees that have a short time horizon. They're guarantees that extend well into the future. Cash flow goals. HUD loan, as everyone is aware, HUD loan, you have a certain element of HUD loans that trap your cash. In a tax credit realm, if we don't pursue a HUD loan, we don't trap cash. On a 9% side, you're able to generate double the amount of tax credit equity. So that just basically allows you to have a lower perm mortgage. If you have a lower perm mortgage, you're gonna maximize your cash flow. On the 4% side, because roughly half of the credits we're not generating, we're going to need a larger perm mortgage, which means we're going to have lower cash flow or moderate cash flow. Compliance and oversight. Your HUD use agreement is going to continue to stay on the property. You'll have REAC scores still. That's your HUD compliance on a HUD loan. But on the tax credit side, you're going to also have tax credit compliance. The state compliance officer is going to go visit your property every year and check your files. The investors, the lenders are going to want to see your operations, want to see your financials. There's a lot of oversight as it relates to a tax credit property. That could be good and bad. That could be good because if you have a lot of oversight, your chances of failing are limited because someone's going to catch something, but it's more work associated to it, okay, for your property management staff. So, it's twofold. And then lastly is the affordability period. I believe everyone on this call, believes in affordability, believes in having quality low-income units in Florida. So I don't think this is going to be a big issue. But on the tax credit side, you're committing to up to 50 years of affordability, whereas on the HUD side, you're not. And that's the overall selection process and how we go about thinking about what's the best financial structure. This is a little daunting, so I'm just going to draw your attention to a couple of things. This is a deal that we did with a non-for-profit, I want to say 5 years ago. This was a 4% tax credit deal. And a couple of things I want to note is this. First thing is on the hard cost side, which you'll see use of funds, below acquisition, hard costs. We were able to do $15.7 million of hard costs. That's roughly a little over $60,000 a door. That was 4 or 5 years ago. That if assuming inflation factors, that right now would be close to 90 a door. We were able to do a big rehab on the 2 buildings. There were section 202 properties located in Hialeah. And we were able to generate, as you see, as tax credit equity, $15.9 million. So That's the benefit of the tax credit program right there. The benefit is $15.9 million of equity we're able to generate to go to the building for renovation purposes. And if we didn't use the tax credit program, we wouldn't be able to do that. So that's why, as I said before, when you're looking at a high deferred maintenance building, your tax credit option is really the best way to go. This is a refinancing summary. Basically, here are the economics of the deal in total. And then this was split between for-profit and nonprofit partners. But again, up top, you have your $15.79 million of rehab. Massive amount of rehab for 5 years ago. The not-for-profit received a $2 million cash out at the closing of the deal through a markup to market and through paying off the 202 loan. The property generates roughly $2.5 million of cash flow for 15 years. And the developer fee in this deal was $6.6 million. So totaling $11.2 million of economics that were split between for-profit and nonprofit owners. So as you can see, not only can you do right by the building, by the tenants, but you can also help the organization's financial stability by generating, a decent amount of economics. And we work with nonprofit partners hand in hand to make sure that that's the case and make sure that this money goes towards their own balance sheet for mission-based activities. Prac to RAD. I'm just going to touch on this. My opinion on Prac to RAD is I think we need to wait. If you look at the ACC to RAD program, which is basically the first RAD program for public housing authorities, it was budget neutral for the first couple of years until they realized that they needed to increase the budget. And now it's not budget neutral. They're actually giving you higher rents. Right now, the Prac to RAD program is budget neutral. I think as these Pracs start to age, then you'll see HUD allocate more money to this program and will effectively allow you to increase your rents. As of right now, what I have before you is the only way you can increase rents if you wanted to go through a Prac to RAD. So you would basically, and I'll summarize this very quickly, you would basically have to order a P&A. And if you're not ordering a P&A or PCR, Properties Conditions Report, I highly recommend you do that. You do that for all your properties. You should understand the current condition of your properties. You should understand what areas of deferred maintenance need to be addressed, not only today, but over the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, so you can plan for it now. Very important. So from a Prac to RAD, you would order this PCR and submit the PCR into HUD. And really what you're trying to do is raise the budget for your project, for your Section 8 rents. Raise the budget to HUD. So you submit it, you raise the budget, and once HUD allows you to raise your rents, that's when you would submit your RAD conversion. And HUD would give you a 20-year HAP contract for those rents. And the goal is with that HAP contract to create a way that you can generate a net operating income. So one, you're increasing rents, but two, you're trying to streamline operations so that you have an NOI that can support debt, okay? And if you can do that, then you basically would close on the RAD, you would close on it with a HUD loan with tax credits, and then you have contract. And then you would use all the proceeds from the LIHTC and from the HUD loan to effectively address the deferred maintenance of your building. Here's an example of it. So let's just say your original rents were $500,000 and you submitted your PCR and you got HUD to increase your rents by $75,000. So now your new rents with the RAD conversion are $575,000. Now, you also work with us to stabilize your operations, and your operations are $345,000, creating a net operating income of $230,000. And as you see below, if you have an NOI of $230,000, you can support a maximum of 3.4. And you could probably generate another, I would say, $6 to $8 million of LIHTC equity, and that will enable you then combined with both to do a rehab. And that's how the Prac to RAD will work today. Again, I think that if your property needs it, let's discuss. If it doesn't, I would hold off. The only other thing on the Pracs I would say is because the HUD program on the Pracs is so small, a lot of these Prac programs have excess land. So I think if you're looking at Pracs and you're looking at to figure out a way to do something with them, first and foremost, look at the density. You could support more units. You know, what we should do is we should talk about doing a new construction deal. And this is what we're doing with Juana in the Catholic Church or the diocese right now. She has a Prac to RAD, she'll get into it, but you know, effectively there's more density. So we're building another 150 units on that property. Okay, and then maybe we'll address the rehab on the Prac at a later point in time. So that's food for thought. And that concludes my presentation. Here's my contact information. Please don't be afraid to use me as a resource. As you can see, I'm very passionate in what I do. Been doing it for a long time. And I welcome any questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, Darren. And I know it's been very hard for our panelists to share all the wealth of information that they can share at this panel. However, what is extremely important is for each of us to pay attention to the contact information. They're more than available to have follow-up conversations with you and give you additional information. We also consider maybe we need to do a part 2, so do not panic. We understand there's a lot of information being shared, but it's very important, and I'm really proud of the different perspective and spectrum we're getting about this topic. Our next panelist is Gary Cohen, from a partner from Schatz and Bowen LLP. As Darren mentioned, it takes a village, and that includes legal expertise. You're definitely going to need it to travel the tax credit journey. Gary's background is impressive. And when I've been tempted to just read a brief portion of it, I can, because you need to get his contact information and understand all that he can do for you. So he's a partner in the Miami office at Schatz & Bowen LLP, where he's a member of the Tax Credit and International Law Practice Group. A Martindale Hubbell AV rated attorney, Gary has been recognized among the best lawyers in America in tax law numerous times since 2007. He focuses on general corporate, business, and tax planning matters, and regularly represents real estate and affordable housing development clients. He also represents developers in structuring the financing and development of affordable housing. Gary is also regularly interact with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development regarding existing properties, another critical partner for this journey. In addition to representing for-profit clients, Gary represents numerous non-profit clients in transactions that develop affordable housing for the formerly homeless. He represents syndicators of federal low-income housing tax credits seeking to invest in new construction and rehabilitation projects and assist in resolutions of disputes. Gary frequently represents real estate developers in documenting transactions between partners, drafting partnership agreements, and tax structuring to gain the most tax efficient position regarding the development and ultimate disposition of properties. In other ways, Gary is the one who keeps us out of jail when we embark in a tax credit journey. So you want to hear this part. Gary, we're all yours.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you very much. I'm going to say hello to everybody. Thank you for allowing me to participate today. I'm fortunate enough to have stumbled into the affordable housing industry back in 1986. I got out of college and law school in 82 and worked in real estate until 86. And there was a tax law change that kind of wiped out all or many of the real estate incentives, but created the low-income housing tax credit program. And my early mentor, Marty Fine, said, you might want to look into this. And I'm really glad that he directed me that way. Affordable housing industry is a wonderful industry to work in. Everybody's interests are aligned. Everybody's trying to accomplish the same goal. It's very non-adversarial. Everybody is very cooperative, and it's a win-win across the board. People get housing, developers make money, nonprofits further their mission. So by participating in this today and being interested in this field, I think you've made a very good decision. This is a very, very excellent field to be involved with. Okay. Having said that, let me see if I can figure out how to pull up my screen and we can get started. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. All right, just 1 second here. All right, we're opening. Bear with me 1 moment. Okay, so I trust we're up here.
We cannot see it right now.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, give me one more moment. Not unexpectedly, I'm struggling here a little bit with the technical
Second time's
aspects.
always the charm.
I suppose so. Let's see. All right, here we go. Let's try this one more time. Okay, how are we doing now?
We
There
can
it is.
see it, but we see your slide preview and your notes,
But not me.
not you. Yes.
All right, let's bear with me one moment.
Check if it gives you the option to put on the slideshow.
Yeah, let's try this one more time, and I apologize. All right, you can see me now at this point, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
All right, so let's try share screen one more time. Okay, are we good?
Yes. Now click from the beginning.
Yes, thank you. Okay,
Perfect.
sorry about that delay, folks. Okay, so we're here to talk about nonprofit participation in affordable housing. The audience here is made up, I think, substantially of nonprofit folks, and you're wondering, okay, how do I get into this, and what is in here for me, and why am I here, and what are the entry points for me to participate? And there are numerous entry points, and there are numerous places in the affordable housing sphere where nonprofit participation is either encouraged or required. Okay, let's talk about what those opportunities might be. Okay, first and foremost, as Marissa pointed out before, FHFC puts out funding cycles, 15 to 18 a year. Many of these funding cycles are specifically targeted to certain groups, tenant groups, and then some of them are what we call general geographic groups. The ones that are targeted to certain specific groups, namely those in need of supportive services, are much more oriented to nonprofit participation. For example, FHFC just recently concluded 2 or 3 separate RFAs oriented towards homeless and oriented towards developmentally disabled or disabled generally. What's interesting about those RFAs is that unlike most RFAs where nonprofit participation can happen, but there's no particular points for them, in these RFAs, nonprofit participation is required, okay? What that means is in these homeless and disabled RFAs, the nonprofit has to own at least 51% of the interest in the deal that the tax credit investor does not own. And more importantly, the nonprofit has to have 51% of all of the economic benefit of the transaction that the tax credit investor does not have. That's a fairly substantial change from prior years for FHFC, and very encouraging for the nonprofit world, because in prior years, nonprofit participation was allowed and somewhat encouraged, but there was really no floor amount of economic participation mandated that the nonprofit have. Now the nonprofit in these targeted RFAs has to have 51% of the cash flow, has to have at least 51% of the sale of refinancing proceeds, which is a large step forward for nonprofits. So in the disabled and homeless RFAs, nonprofit participation is required. Okay, so that's one particular entry point. Another entry point is elderly affordable housing. In the state of Florida, there is a real estate tax exemption for elderly affordable housing. Elderly affordable housing, in order to get the tax exemption, means that at least 75% of your tenants have to be either 62 or older or disabled. Most importantly, this tax exemption is only available for a limited partnership where the sole general partner is a nonprofit corporation. Okay, so if you're doing an elderly deal, elderly deals tend to be 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom transactions, and there's not 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom units. So the rent line is lower because obviously rents for 1 and 2 bedroom units are smaller. Expenses, however, seem to be fairly consistent, insurance, operating expenses, things like that. So since the rent line is smaller and the net operating income is going to be smaller, and your ability to get a first mortgage is going to be shrunk because your net operating income is smaller, you need to increase net operating income. How do you do that? You get exempt from real estate taxes, which could be anywhere from $700 to $1,300 a unit a year. So in a 100-unit transaction, you can imagine you might wind up saving, $100,000 in real estate taxes if you adopt this structure. For-profit developers who are doing elderly deals will seek out nonprofits to serve as the general partner of their partnership in order to avail themselves of this ad valorem tax exemption. So it's possible that you could get approached in order to and asked to be the general partner of an elderly affordable housing transaction. Alternatively, if you're aware that there's one on the books, on the planning books in your community and coming up, you can reach out to the for-profit developer and say, this is something that we are interested in. There is no requirement there as to the economic level of participation by the general partner, by the nonprofit, but you can get in the deal that way, okay? Another entry point, a frequent entry point for nonprofits is in connection with public housing transactions. The public housing agencies are not themselves nonprofits, but they frequently have nonprofit affiliates, okay? They have 501c3 exempt from federal taxation affiliates. These entities are frequently utilized when a public housing association does business with a for-profit developer. For example, as Darren noted before, he does a lot of work with public housing associations, the public housing agencies. The public housing agency is not going to be a direct partner in the deal. The statute doesn't really allow for that, but they will have an affiliated nonprofit 501c3. So if anybody in the audience is involved with nonprofits that are affiliated with public housing agencies, be aware that in these PHA transactions, there is frequently a place for your PHA affiliated nonprofit to participate, okay? The final type of RFA that Marissa referenced before were the general geographic RFAs. That is an RFA for Miami, an RFA for the 6 large counties in Florida, an RFA for all the medium counties, and an RFA for the small counties. Those RFAs put out a majority of the tax credit money every year. There is no real advantage in those RFAs to nonprofit participation, okay? You can be in one of those deals for a variety of reasons that I might point out below, but there is no competitive advantage to a for-profit developer bringing in a nonprofit partner into these RFAs. Now, there are plenty of reasons why a nonprofit might be well placed in these deals, but insofar as trying to win the application under the FHFC rules, FHFC is not going to grant any advantage to a deal that has a nonprofit in it. Now, if you're in a general geographic RFA like Miami and you're wanting to do an elderly deal, well, yes, that elderly deal is likely going to have a nonprofit in it in order to get the elderly ad valorem tax exemption, like I talked about before. So that's a place where a nonprofit could participate in the general statewide competitions for money, okay? So those are the frequent entry points for nonprofits to participate. There are a couple of others. If a nonprofit, either church-based or PHA-based or otherwise, is sitting on a piece of valuable land that's attractive to be developed as affordable housing, then certainly the nonprofit is going to be approached by a for-profit developer to develop affordable housing. And the question there, of course, becomes, is the nonprofit just going to sell the property, or are they going to stay in the deal? You can sell the property, get out, take the cash, use the cash to further your nonprofit mission, or you can stay in the deal, participate in the cash flow that's generated, participate in the sale or refinancing proceeds that might happen on the back end of the deal. And maybe, as we'll explain a little bit further below, retake ownership of the property after 15 years. So when would a nonprofit be attractive outside of competitive advantages and RFAs. One, if they own a valuable piece of land. Two, if there's local subsidy to be obtained. In Miami-Dade County, we have surtax money. In other counties, there is state and local money frequently available. And that money frequently is more advantageously obtained if a nonprofit is involved. So those are other opportunities for the nonprofit. So having said that and discussed the entry points for nonprofits, let's talk about what happens when you get into a deal either by yourself or with a for-profit partner. Obviously, at first blush, you're like, what do I need this for-profit partner for? I'm going to do it myself. I'll make all the developer fee. I'll make all the cash flow. You know, easy peasy, right? Obviously not. Tax credit transactions are highly complex. If you haven't traveled down this road before, you are going to need a for-profit partner. Granted, there are consultant people out there in the world who will consult with nonprofits and help them do the deal without actually adding a for-profit partner. Conceivably, that is feasible, but probably I wouldn't recommend it because that consultant isn't going to do things like cosign guarantees or put up money or anything like that. He's just going to take a fee for advising you, and you as the nonprofit partner are still taking all the risk in the transaction. So why would you go into business with a for-profit partner to do an affordable housing project? First and foremost, as Darren referenced before, if you're doing a transaction where a tax credit investor, like let's say JP Morgan Chase, is giving you $20 million, they're not giving you $20 million and saying, go build the project, no worries, good luck. No. They want guarantees that what they're buying, which is a 10-year stream of tax credits, will be delivered to them. So they're going to want you to guarantee completion of the project. They're going to want you to guarantee that it rents up. They're going to want you to guarantee that you keep it in compliance for 15 years. They're going to want you to guarantee that you keep the property environmentally clean. And they're going to want you to guarantee that if the property runs negative cash flow, that you will fund that negative cash flow. There's a lot of substantial guarantees, okay? And on a $20 million investment by a tax credit guarantee, by a tax credit investor, they're going to want to see that you have sufficient net worth and liquidity to make your guarantee meaningful. You know, if you have a balance sheet that's got $50,000 of cash and one piece of property worth $1 million, that's not going to cut it for the tax credit investor who's putting $20 million in your deal, because your guarantee is not going to be particularly meaningful to them. And that instance, the tax credit investor is going to say, go get a for-profit partner with a nice balance sheet and have him put up a guarantee. So that's one reason why you're going to have to partner likely with a for-profit partner. There are a couple of tax credit investors out there in the world who are more amenable and sensitized to nonprofit affordable housing transactions than others. Primarily, that's Enterprise Social Investment Corporation out of Maryland and National Equity Fund out of Chicago. Those two tax credit syndicator groups were both formed specifically to aid affordable housing developed, at least in part, by nonprofit partners. So if you're doing it by yourself, or even if you're doing it with a for-profit partner and you want a tax credit investor that might be more attuned to the sensibilities of a nonprofit partner, those are the two outfits that you would want to go to. Now, it may be that when you're partnering with a for-profit partner, that the for-profit partner, seeing as he's putting up all the money and taking all the risk, wants to select the tax credit investor himself. And we'll talk about that in a second as to who should decide those types of decisions. The other thing is when you're trying to apply for money with Florida Housing Finance Corporation, they are going to want to see that you have the requisite developer experience to award you the points so that you can file a competitive application. Florida Housing is generally going to want to see that you've done at least three affordable housing deals, and at least one of them has happened in fairly recent time, and that the deals are somewhat comparable in size to the deal that you're proposing to build now. If you don't have the requisite developer experience in your nonprofit, you are going to need to bring in a for-profit partner to provide the requisite developer experience. These are all reasons why you're going to likely have to partner with a for-profit partner. When is this going to come up? In what context are you going to start talking about joint venturing with a for-profit partner? What's going to happen is you're either going to file an application with a for-profit, or you're going to be approached to participate. You cannot wait until after the application wins to figure out what your economic deal is with the for-profit partner. You have to put that in writing early on. Otherwise, you win the deal, and then you start negotiating. You're not negotiating from a place of strength anymore. So you have to cut your deal with the for-profit partner right away. It can be a letter of intent. It could be a memorandum of understanding. It can be a very simple document, because there's not that many issues that need to be addressed. Okay, the issues that need to be addressed are the ones listed below on this slide sheet. When I say negotiating from strength, if the nonprofit partner is bringing a bunch of local money into the deal, or if it's bringing the land into the deal, or is otherwise somehow essential to the transaction, and the transaction can't succeed without them, then in that instance, the nonprofit partner is going to be able to cut a better deal for itself vis-a-vis the arrangement between itself and the for-profit partner. If you're being brought in as the nonprofit partner because the deal needs a nonprofit partner, but you don't otherwise have any particular attribute that you're bringing to the deal, then you're not necessarily negotiating from such a strong standpoint, okay? What are you negotiating when you cut your deal with the for-profit partner? All right, there's about 5 major items. One is the right to participate in major decisions. That is the selection of the tax credit investor, the selection of the deal lawyer, the selection of the lender, the selection of the general contractor, and the management company. You're going to want to have a say-so in those decisions, and you should be able to have a say-so in those decisions. Next is the economic sharing arrangements. There's 3 pools of money that are generated in an affordable housing transaction. There's the developer fee, which is generated during construction and during rent up for the most part. And then there's cash flow from operations, and then there's sale and refinancing proceeds, okay? In order for a deal to be classified as nonprofit by Florida Housing Finance Corporation, the nonprofit partner has to be able to receive at least 25% of the developer fee. In the RFAs that I referenced before, the disabled and homeless RFAs, the nonprofit has to get 51% of the cash flow and the sale or refinancing proceeds. In the general geographic RFAs, there is no such requirement. The nonprofit could get $5,000 to be in the deal, frankly. So you want to negotiate for as much of the cash flow and as much of the developer fee as you can get, understanding that the for-profit partner is going to want the lion's share of the money because it's putting up the meaningful guarantees. It's probably providing the requisite experience and expertise to bring the deal to completion, okay? Guarantees and indemnification obligations. The tax credit investor and the construction lender are all going to want full guarantees of completion, amongst other items. The nonprofit's guarantee may not be that meaningful unless the nonprofit has a very strong balance sheet. If the nonprofit does not have a strong balance sheet, it may be that the for-profit partner is the only one that will provide guarantees in the deal. The nonprofit, in a perfect world, should try to avoid guarantee exposure and let the for-profit guarantee, particularly since it's likely that the for-profit is going to be the one who's developing the deal and taking the lead. So if there's a screw up, it's kind of on them because they didn't do their job right. And why should you be on guarantee exposure if the for-profit partner screwed up? Okay. So you want to kind of keep the guarantee exposure over on the for-profit side. Sometimes in disabled and homeless deals, particularly, the for-profit partner may not want to stick around post-completion because these deals tend to not cash flow significantly. So they're quote unquote in it for the developer fee. And they may be willing, once the deal rents up and stabilizes, to withdraw from the deal, so long as they can get off the guarantees. As the nonprofit partner, you're okay with that, provided that you feel you have the requisite expertise to run the deal by yourself without the for-profit partner's involvement after stabilization. If you're not comfortable with that, then you should keep the for-profit partner in the deal as your partner for the duration of the deal. Last but not least, and this is extremely important, Section 42 of the Internal Revenue Code is the low-income housing tax credit section. It allows a deal to give the nonprofit partner a right to buy the property at the end of 15 years for a purchase price equal to basically $1 over the existing debt on the property. Okay? In a typical tax credit transaction that costs $30 million to develop, you might have $25 million of tax credit equity and $5 million of debt. So at the end of year 15, if you have the right to buy the property for $5 million and $1 when it costs $30 million to develop, that's a home run for the nonprofit. Also, at that point, if an affordable housing transaction is owned 100% by a nonprofit partner, it is exempt from real estate tax. So you want to negotiate upfront with your for-profit partner to get that nonprofit right of first refusal. If there's one thing that I can leave you with in this whole thing, it's that is very important for you to obtain. So that's pretty much my remarks. I appreciate what folks said before about calling me, but I do feel compelled to tell you that I am, in fact, fairly retired from the practice of law at this point. So while I am available to answer questions, and you can go on the Shuts website and track me down, and I'm happy to help people out with one-off questions all the time, I really won't be taking on full-on representation of new clients at this point. So thank you very much for allowing me to participate. I really appreciate it, and I'm available to answer questions, of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary. And this is really critical information as we embark in the journey of tax credit. Any burning question before we move to our next panelist? We're going to leave some time at the end too for additional question. You can also write your questions at the box for question and answers, and we can address them accordingly as well. Well, our next presenter is very close to my heart. It's Juana Mejia. She is the VP, Housing Management and Operation for Catholic Housing Management. She understands the different facets of developing affordable housing from the provider's perspective, which is what I can relate to. I always say that she actually makes tax credit looks easy, and that is a gift from God that she has. In terms of some of the highlights of her career, she's the current Vice President of Housing Development and Operation for Catholic Housing Management, and has extensive experience in property management and running real estate development companies for non-profit housing developers. Throughout the years, Juana has supervised hundreds of employees that were responsible for the management and maintenance of almost 4,000 units. She provided consulting services to affordable housing organizations in the areas of staff development, property management, asset management, and financial management, including staff training in these arenas. Juana, I always say, is my partner in crime, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy her.
Thank you so much, Janet. I really appreciate it. It's going to be a tough act to follow with all of the great presenters that we've had, but I'm going to try. As Janet mentioned, my name is Juana Mejia. I am Vice President of Housing Development and Operations for a nonprofit in Miami called Catholic Housing Management, which is a division of Catholic Health Services, and we are a ministry of the Archdiocese of Miami. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon, and I'm hoping that I can shed a little bit more light on what Melissa, Darren, and Gary have added so far. So thank you again for joining us. I have had extensive tax credit experience in the past before joining this organization. So I'm really happy to share this information of what we've done at Catholic Housing Management. So we're going to talk about the owner, developer, and property manager role that we have played, and hopefully give you a little bit of insight as someone that has been doing affordable housing for over 45 years. We've been owner, developer, but all of our housing has predominantly been HUD housing, meaning 202s, PRACs, 236, for seniors over the age of 62. So we've actually have done that for over 45 years. So I want to say about 7 years ago, we had properties that needed extensive rehab, and we were going to try to refinance with some of the HUD refinancing options that were out there. But unfortunately, the options were not enough to give us the money that we needed to renovate the properties that we had. We had 16 properties in South Florida, over 2,300 units. Some of the properties that we were looking at were over 40 years old and needed a lot of rehab. So we wanted to explore an option that would give us something different than what the HUD option, refinancing under 223 or 221D3, but something that can give us the amount of rehab that we needed. The second thing was that as developers and owners of affordable housing, the programs that we had done before never gave us cash flow. So we were truly doing it and have been doing it for years for mission, and we're going to continue to do it for the mission of the organization. But the types of housing we had done never gave us cash flow, never gave us developers fee because it wasn't part of the program. So not only did we need to renovate the properties and make the properties safe, secure, and beautiful for our residents, but also making sure that we were able to get funds available for the organization to continue to do its mission. So again, I'm going to give you a little bit of our experience in the last 7 years being an owner, developer, and property manager of affordable housing, and specifically the last 7 years tax credit housing. So the first one we're going to go over is the owner's perspective. Just want to also remind everybody, you have the Q&A button there. If you have any questions at the end, I'll gladly answer them. But I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the owner's perspective, a little different than what Darren gave you, a little different than what Gary talked about, but just our experience in having done tax credits in the last 7 years. Like I said, we had 16 properties when we started this process, but none of them were tax credits. Actually, the first slide, I can show 2 pictures. So the pictures on the left is our brand new tax credit development that we're building for seniors over the age of 62 in Miramar, Florida. That one is going to open and lease up in April. The one on the right is some beautiful pictures of hallways of a property that was 40 years old that we renovated. And we've done a total roughly about $32 million in renovations in 4 properties. So it's been extensive and we've learned a lot from it. So again, the owner's perspective. So kind of things to consider as the owner perspective and things we had to consider. So the first one is, why choose the tax credit program? And I mentioned a minute ago why. It was that we were trying to restructure our deals with HUD financing, and it just wasn't enough money in there to do the amount of rehab that our properties needed. So that was caused us to look at the tax credit program because, as most of you may know or may not know, it's free money. Comes with a lot of compliance and restrictions, but it isn't a loan that is put on the property. So we could use that extra money to actually do more renovations at the property level. So that was the main reason why we chose the tax credit program. The other thing we have to consider is, do we need a development partner or an ownership partner? And for the reasons that Gary mentioned, because we had not done tax credit before, we didn't have the experience, you know, our investors wouldn't allow us to do it because we didn't have the experience. We actually went out and put out an RFP to select a development partner that was in line with our mission, that was in line with our goals on how we do business and who we serve. We predominantly serve seniors over the age of 62. So we actually went out and put an RFP together for a development partner. And we have done really well. We currently have 2 development partners that we're working with. We have renovated, as I mentioned, 4 properties. We building our first new construction tax credit deal. Our development partner, Smith & Hensey, which is one of our presenters today. Darren is actually also, we're in the process of building another senior property in Pompano Beach that's 62 units. I'm sorry, 150 units in Pompano. So we're really glad that we're able to go in and partner up with experienced developers that can assist us in doing this. So we actually, again, needed to select a development partner. We actually also didn't want to carry all the guarantees. This is new to us. So we actually, you know, made the decision to partner up as owners as well. That's an individual decision that you would need to make. We did what we thought was best for us based on our experience and what was best for us as an organization, what was best for the deal and what we were doing and putting together for our residents. The other item is choosing a partner. For us, it was very important to choose a partner that was in line with our mission, you know, providing affordable housing, of making sure that, the properties are sustainable, that we would have cash flow to further our mission, and that we were in line with our mission. So that for us was very important, that it was a partner that would understand us and that would work with us to continue to further that. The other item is, what other options may be out there? So one of the reasons our more recent partner was selected, Smith and Hensey, is because it's very important when you have a partner that looks outside the box. So we have properties that are all Section 8. I don't know if I mentioned that. All of our properties are 202s, Prox 236. So partnering up with someone that can find additional funding besides the tax credit program, it was important to us, so that we can be able to do more rehab and be able to get more cash out for our mission. So this particular developer, Smith and Hensey, which presented, gave us that. Look outside the box for additional funds that may be out there in different programs like the surtax, home loans that are out there, to help us provide as much low-income housing as possible. So it's not just tax credit rent, but it's extremely low-income rent. So it's not the 60% of area median, but being able to serve residents that are 30% of area median, which are what we all consider extremely low-income seniors. So that's our mission and our focus. So we're able to find partners that can do that with us. Pros and cons of the tax credit program. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've been doing all spectrums of affordable housing. And I have to say, the tax credit program, it's a great program. It provides you, money to do your renovations. The cons, I would say, comes with a lot of tax credit compliance pieces. But if you come from the world of Section 8, and at least for me, because I've done both, the world from Section 8 and tax credit, to me, tax credit dots the I's and crosses the T's more, but the Section 8 program that we handle and had 40 years of experience in is no cup of tea, right? It comes with a lot of compliance, a lot of restrictions. Investors in the tax credit program will come in and do physical inspections. They'll come and do administrative inspections of your files and all of that. But when you've done the Section 8 program, you're used to management and occupancy reviews, you're used to REACTs. So for us, the cons of the compliance, and we have this running joke at the organization that before we started to do the tax credit program, I had a lot less gray hair, right? So one of the cons is it is a very complicated program, but the pros definitely outweigh the cons. We've been able, again, to restructure 4 properties, over $30 million worth of rehab, cash flow for the mission, and added a whole bunch of extra amenities to our properties for our seniors that we didn't have before. So again, the pros overweigh the cons of the program. The other thing I wanted to mention, so when we decided to do the tax credit program, one of the things that was very important to us is to make sure that we restructured ourselves and our organization to be able to take on those programs. So we had to go in and say, who do we have in our staff? Who could we bring in to ensure that we are successful in working in the tax credit program and in the tax credit world? So within our organization, we restructured. So our goal, specifically my role, went from being Director of Property Management and Asset Management to Director of Real Estate Development and Asset Management. And we hired a Director of Property Management. That allowed us to work very closely with our development partners, with our investors, to make sure that our organization was structured in a way that we're able to supervise this. So myself, along with our CFO, we work very closely together to make sure that we're meeting all the needs of our partners and investors, and that the deals are put together in a way that we're going to continue to do what we do. Again, we've been doing this over 40 years. Now we just added a layer of what I call complexity and additional dollars. So one of the things that I think is important that we focused more attention on as we went and wanted to talk to folks about was ensuring, as you enter, especially into housing, but when you're in the tax credit program, making sure that you have asset management within your organization. Somebody that's going in and looking at the deal from beginning to end, transitioning that deal and that process to your property management company, and making sure that as an owner, that there is an owner's rep, which is usually an asset manager, that is going to make sure that all the commitments that you made to your partners, to your investors, to your lenders are being met. So I can't stress enough how important it is to have asset manager And for us, it was important to restructure that way. So there was more of a focus in the real estate development side, but also in the asset managing. For us, it was important to know that we're not just building housing, but we're building housing and we're making sure that it is sustainable for the life of the property and as long as we keep the properties, and asset management does that for us. The last thing to look into that we had took into consideration, and folks should take a look into consideration, even if you do, Section 8 housing, as you do the tax credit program, is should I be managing? If I choose to do the tax credit program, should I be managing that property in-house or should I hire a third party? So again, very important to make that decision. Because we had been doing affordable housing for over 40 years, it was easy enough for us to get qualified to be a property manager of a tax credit deal because we have been doing affordable housing under the Section 8 program for over 40 years. What we did do in addition to keeping the management is that we partnered up with someone to do our compliance, our tax credit compliance. So that just added a layer of comfort for us that we have a third party looking at our tax credit compliance. So we signed a compliance agreement with a third party to do that for us. So that's how we felt comfortable to be able to keep the property management in-house. But that one's going to be very important because, as I mentioned, one of the cons of the tax credit program is the compliance piece and the complexity. So important to have asset management and important to have a management company that's going to be able to meet the needs of those commitments that you've put together and you're going to need to comply with. Now, a little bit about the nonprofit developer perspective. So again, when you're a developer, and there's a lot more complexity than this, I'm just going to give a quick overview of our experience, is we needed to decide what our development role was going to be and put together a development rights agreement with our development partner. How involved do you want to be? Because we've been doing affordable housing for a long time, we want to be very involved. We're very involved, very engaged. We want to be part of everything that's happening, making all the decisions, looking at all the reports, choosing the partners, choosing the bank, and making sure that we're part of that process. So negotiating your development rights agreement with your development partner and or your co-owner is going to be very important. And Gary was on, so it's very important for us to have had a really good tax credit attorney to help us through the process to make sure that we do have really good development rights agreements, really good partnership agreements, and that they're looking out for us, right? Each partner will have their own attorneys. As nonprofits, we had our own tax credit attorneys that have been helping us through the process to make sure that we're being covered in all aspects. As I think maybe Gary or I think it was Janet said, we definitely don't want to go to jail. So we want to make sure that we have an attorney, a tax credit attorney there helping us along the way. Who within the organization will work with development partners? So again, in terms of roles within your organization, it'd be important to know who's going to work with your development partner and or your co-owner. Is it going to be a real estate development person? Always there's some involvement from your CFO in your organization. Is it going to be an asset manager? That's going to be an owner rep. So trying to decide within your organization who's going to be working with that development partner. Do you have that in-house currently if you're going to do a tax credit deal, or do you need to go out? So as I mentioned, we restructured. So we kind of restructured a little bit to make sure that we have the right people in play in order to take on the tax credit program. The next one is, sorry, my finger's going really fast. The property management perspective. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Analyze yourself, whether you have a third-party manager or you self-manage. For us, we self-manage our properties. But if we had a third-party manager, the same thing. Do they have experience managing tax credit properties? Are they able to take it on? Do you have experience managing Section 8? So let's say for us, because we had experience managing Section 8, it was easy enough for us to say we can manage the tax credit program as well. So if you have yourself done Section 8 and don't have tax credit experience, can you take that on with all the compliance requirements yourself? Or do you need to bring in someone that does the compliance management but still continue to self-manage? It's important to evaluate that at the beginning before you go in for tax credit funding so that you know who's going to actually manage those properties or that property. People always ask me, how is tax credit compliance different than other types of, affordable housing, subsidized housing? Because I've done both sides. I would say that, the section 42 of the IRS code, which is what governs the tax credit program, to me, because I've been doing this for a long time, is not very different than the HUD 4350 for section 8. If you've done section 8 subsidized housing, again, to me, tax credit is not more complicated. The compliance is about the same. I just find with the tax credit program, again, you just have to really dot those I's and cross those T's and making sure that everything is getting double checked, because you can lose a lot of money by, doing something wrong in the compliance side in property management. Like, for example, moving somebody in that's not eligible. And how do you move somebody in that's not eligible when they qualify for rent? You just not qualify for rent. You can increase their rent. They didn't qualify initially. Maybe they can qualify later. But with the tax credit program, everybody loses money. The investors lose money. Your partners lose money. The owners lose money. So it's really important that you know that you can handle the compliance and the complexity of that. Where Section 8, somebody lives there, doesn't qualify, you have to figure out what to do in that aspect. So to me, tax credit compliance is a little different. To me, it's more stringent than the Section 8 other types of subsidized programs that you run, but they work very similarly in that aspect. Lastly, is it financially feasible for property management? So Darren talked about the financial feasibility, and as well as I did at the beginning on why do tax credit, but also looked at if you're going to self-manage or bring it in-house, is it feasible for you in terms of the management fee that you're going to get? So negotiating that upfront at the beginning, negotiating your accounting and bookkeeping fees, and your compliance fees. So if you're going to hire a third-party compliance, letting them know upfront when they prepare the budget, when they're trying to restructure this deal, to let them know that you are going to, put in a compliance fee to be able to do that. So find out, is it feasible if you're going to self-manage this or third party, and then make a decision on what's best for you and the organization. For us, it's been a win-win situation. For us, it hasn't been, oh my God, we're sorry we did this. We started 7 years ago, and I have to say, we have renovated 4 tax credit properties that were existing properties of ours. We've got a new construction going on of 113 units. We're going to build a new senior housing of 150. And all of that has been great because, again, the key for us was we were able to renovate the units and add amenities for our residents, which is our priority through our mission. And then secondly, and definitely second, is we've been able to actually get some developers fees, some cash flow from those deals to continue to further our mission and the mission of everything that we do within the organization. Hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. I kept it nice and sweet because I think you guys probably wanted to hear more about, what Melissa was saying, what Darren was saying, and what Gary was saying. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview from someone that, as of 7 years ago, had not done tax credits, but had 40 years of experience doing affordable housing. And now we are well on our way to our 6th tax credit deal and hopefully more. So glad to have been with you this afternoon. If you've got any questions, please feel free to put it in the question box, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Juana. And before we move to our last panelist, which have a lot of very good and critical information, we have a great question to any of our panelists. Not sure who would like to address it, but it is, how large does a project have to be for the use of tax credits? Anyone who would like to take a stab on that one?
I think Melissa or Darren can answer that one.
Yes.
Melissa probably the best one because she knows what's on the applications. So I think either Melissa or Darren.
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, from a perspective of just a 4% non-competitive bond deal, I would say the smallest we would look at is probably 60 units. As it relates to, competitive bond deals, I got to go back to the RFA. Maybe we're thinking upon the RFA for sale if there's a minimum unit amount there. I think it's maybe 50, but I would say for me, 60 and more or above.
Yes, I
And
think
that's
we
the
will
reason why if
second
you have
that.
2 prac deals. I'm sorry, Jen. I was gonna, and another thing is, if you have 2 prac deals at 50 and 50. That's the reason why you should combine them.
Sounds
Right, but
good.
I want to add, Janet, as well, you know, I think Melissa input in terms of what's out there for RFA. I think, Darren, what you're mentioning is what you think is feasible, but not how many units you need to have to qualify, depending on what's out there for tax credits, right? Because there's different programs out there, especially for special
Correct.
needs, which could be 30 units for special need housing. So again, look at the RFA that is put out by Florida Housing and see what the qualifications and minimum unit requirements. What Darren has given is a recommendation, you know, as a developer on the amount of units for it to be feasible. But definitely there are RFAs that you can do, you know, less units than that.
Thank you both, and we can testify to that. The performance is to work. I think the more units, the better it looks. So, but it depends of the opportunities. Well, our last but not least panelist is Travis Brown, who is the VP of Housing and Development for Volunteers of America, Florida. So this feels a little bit like nepotism to me because it's one of my colleagues. He actually is one person who's very passionate about increasing the inventory of affordable housing to the whole state of Florida. He also managed new project development, design, construction, rehabilitation, as well as overseeing the property management of housing and facility operations across the state of Florida. Before joining Volunteers of America, Florida, Travis spent around 10 years working in the housing construction field. Since joining Volunteers of America, Florida in 2013, Travis has managed the development of housing projects funded by sources including the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, Home, HUD, SHIP, SALE, and more. Travis specializes in permanent supported housing as part of our mission for the most vulnerable in our state. I also include Travis' background, which is in historic preservation, because he's very passionate about that. But also every time that he brings a tax credit potential development project, he gives me petite heart attacks. But I forget about all of them as soon as we do the ribbon cutting and we celebrate the increase of affordable housing units for our state. So Travis, take it over.
All right, thanks for having me. I will have to say to Juana's presentation, you maybe can't see it in the video, but there's no doubt that tax credits will give you more gray hair. That is for sure. Let me see if I can figure out how to share. Get out of your screen.
We can see it. All you need to do is go to slideshow.
Yeah, I was trying to get this crap to go away here.
No, go to slideshow. Click on slideshow.
Yeah, but I can't even see it. How do you get to it?
Well, we'll see in your screen.
I know, but I can't get under this. Participants is in the way.
Oh, okay. Try to click that. Keep going up.
Hold on, maybe give it a second, it'll go away. There we go. Okay, does it work now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, and just like since you mentioned the historic preservation, I'll give a little flyer. The Florida Trust is for historic preservation is really trying to get historic preservation tax credit to the state, and I think that would be pretty awesome. It's kind of sad, you know, from that Florida doesn't, you know, really appreciate a little bit more historic preservation, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So again, I'm Travis Brown, VP of Housing and Development for Volunteers America, Florida. And we're going to talk a little bit today about specifically, we tried to not overlap, there will be some overlap, but specifically permanent supportive housing and the homeless 9% through Florida Housing, low-income housing tax credits. So I'll give you a little overview of Volunteers America, Florida, just so you can kind of see if it looks like something that your organization can relate to. I think, you know, we're very present at the leading age conferences and trainings. So I know, you know, a lot of the organizations look similar to us. So VOA has been around, similar to Catholic Charities. We started in 1896, Florida in 1914. We are a nonprofit, spread across Florida statewide, over 200 employees in 26 growing, you know, monthly across the state. So it's kind of unique and kind of difficult to be spread from Pensacola to Key West. So you can kind of see here how far it is from site to site. So we serve, you know, a very similar population to, I think, a lot on this call, starting with the frail seniors and the 202s, from veterans to those that are homeless to those with a mental illness. So we touch the lives of approximately 5,500 daily. And I want to say, so we have both the housing development side, the property management, and then we also have the support services. So that makes it, you know, everywhere from support service coordination, like you see at the 202s, all the way up to direct services through the behavioral health and health services. We manage about 2,000 units statewide. About 1,100 of those are the 202 that are all turning. I know you've heard a lot about it, turning to the tax credits. So all 10 of our properties across the state are just finished or are in the middle of a conversion to Section 8 and tax credit. So we also have some units for homeless veterans, HUD 811s, which are smaller pracs. So we have a wide a range of funding sources. And we already had some experience, you'll see this later, with development. It was kind of on the smaller side, but in order for us to scale up to, you know, increase those that we serve, we really had to partner. And that's kind of what today's about, is a lot of the partnerships with for-profits and other nonprofits to really scale up the operations. Right now, we have a tax credit in St. Pete and some smaller 35, 30 unit, and then a bunch of rehabs. So, but we try to do at least one joint venture with a for-profit per year. Here's an example of our Innovare development in St. Petersburg, a low-income housing tax credit. So this one just shows you the quality of development. It's a well-funded program, especially when you get a 9% deal, and you can really get a quality product, which, you know, I really try to have our developments get away from your standard public housing kind of you know, box, and we really are excited about this program. So what led us to the homeless 9%? I mean, it's pretty simple. Look at these staggering numbers. I mean, the HUD annual homeless report, on a single day, there's nationwide, there's almost 600 individuals experiencing homelessness, and about 50% of these have a mental illness. So for the leading age population, you know, you throw in aging in place and all of the complexities of that on top of mental health and some of the other financial limitations. It just shows it fits right into our mission of serving those in need. So it's a permanent supportive housing. So it is kind of runs in a different kind of category than just affordable housing. So it's really set, it's a model used for individuals experiencing homelessness who have mental illness or another disability. It's just a combination of housing and support services. That's the key, is you're not just taking an affordable housing approach, you're looking at support services. And usually that's really, the funding is kind of focused on preventing institutionalization, relapse, and then increasing in income as well as housing stability. So, how do you reduce public expenses for homelessness, hospitalizations, housing? It's really our model at Volunteers of America Florida is housing is a place to heal. Our services are better outcomes when clients are stably housed. One of our agency outcomes is moving people to independence. So they come in and they get our support services, and then they move to a different lower level of independence. And the number one barrier that all of our case managers always say is they're ready to move out, but there's nowhere that they can afford. So that's another reason why we really are scaling up our housing development for permanent supportive housing. And then we did already do smaller developments. So it was a natural kind of jump to larger scale developments, which, again, the larger scale developments, the operating performance are a little bit more stable than the smaller ones. So I'll go through a couple of the pieces here. I'm going to focus kind of on this 9% homeless RFA that, is only a small piece of the entire low income housing tax credit world. So funding. So like I said, it's a 9% deal. So the different part about these RFAs that it's scored off of written narratives, which really kind of appeals, I think, to nonprofits because we're used to grant writing. The tough part is, even when you get awarded, it's a 12-month, underwriting design time frame, and then a 12-month construction time frame. So you're really planning when you're writing your narrative almost two years to 2.5 years ahead, and that makes it very difficult. And then that 9% is usually with other funding sources that you might already be familiar with, such as SAIL, ELI, National Housing Trust Fund, some of these funding sources that Marissa spoke about. And some of them are balloons, some of them are forgivable. So, and they're all different kind of AMIs. And I have one screen, I think, later that kind of breaks down one of our deals in the AMIs. There's one RFP per year for this homeless 9%. So you can kind of set your clock on preparing for it. It kind of has a little bit different prescription on where in the state the funding priorities are each year, but it's basically, its summary is 10 to 15 pages of narratives. Got to have site control land. You got to know operating and development costs. There's a lot of the grant writing that goes into it. VOA writes, with help, obviously, we write our own narratives for the RFPs, which I know is a lot of the for-profit partners like that part of it. Then you have a pre-application presentation you got to present to Florida Housing with your partner and in the deal structure. And then protests, I just put this on here because it's so frustrating. No offense to attorneys, but they've kind of made this more difficult, and you have to be prepared to defend yourself. Even if you're the highest scorer, you almost always put out $10,000 to $25,000 or more just to defend yourself. So, but again, nonprofits are used to having pretty strong legal team. So the narratives, just to give you kind of an idea, so they break it up into 5 different sections. So the first one is explaining your target population. And let me go and I'll go into a little bit later to show you exactly what the target populations can be. It's basically homeless with special needs, but you can focus on physical disabilities. You can focus on some other disability levels, youth coming out of foster care, a couple different. And then it has an operating and management of supportive housing, permanent supportive housing. So that's 40 points. That's a big part of it that most of the people in the leading age family would score very well. And community access to community-based resources. So you've heard this from about everybody. It's got to be in a great location, and you have to have community partners. So both generally well located property and access to those, as well as very specific to tenant like substance abuse, etc. And then there's some new ones that they've added. This one is assist intended residents in meeting their housing stability and self-sufficiency needs. So again, it's just kind of bragging about you for another 20 points. And I think they break it down about 18 months previously. What are your outcomes and how do you track those and how can you prove that you're better than the other nonprofit applicants? And then involvement in the homeless resource network. So if any of you are familiar with the COCs and homeless coalitions, it's not just them, it's also, I got a slide later, but it's also juveniles, it's the, DCF, managing entities, etc. So programs and services. So here's eligible target population. So this breaks down who you're going to be serving when you come into the RFA. So it's 50% of the units are set aside for formerly homeless. It's a pretty vague definition of homeless. It's not your typical chronically homeless one. And then 20% of the units are set aside for the special needs, but those can overlap. And then the rest of them are affordable. Homeless definition here, you can kind of see it's a pretty encompassing definition of homeless. So you can be in a shelter, you can be couch surfing, etc. Special needs, so you can either, they break it up by how many ADA units you have to kind of serve based on whether you're doing physical mobility impairments or mental illness. But there's also survivors of domestic violence. We all know VAWA, young adults formerly in foster care. Here's kind of a unit mix. So it kind of shows you like there's 22% AMI. Of those of you that are property managers, you know how low that is. So we have 2 units here. We have 4 units at 22, and then you have a bunch that are at 33. You have 8 that are at 33% AMI, and the rest are at 60. So it's becoming more normal now that they have income averaging on your tax credits, but you are serving a very low AMI. So that's why the connection to the housing authorities are so important. So do any of these look familiar to you? So these are kind of who you would, when you're talking about the homeless network, you're talking about homeless coalitions, you're talking about MCOs, you're talking about housing authorities, DCF, VA, a lot of you are probably familiar with HUD-VASH vouchers, Department of Corrections, jail system, school board, child welfare, depending on whether you're kind of focusing on more of a family development or individuals. Support services, I kind of went over this. I mean, you just have to show that you understand connections that the residents need to healthcare, behavioral health, substance abuse, low-income prescriptions, childcare, training, education, employment. I mean, the very similar stuff that you do in a HUD 202 with the elderly, maybe not so much training, education, employment, but connecting to other providers in the community or doing direct services yourself. So just a reminder, it's supportive housing RFP. So I think really the support services are key, whether you're doing that internally or you have really good partners. Your community, your investors, everybody's going to want to know that you're not going to put a bunch of homeless people in a building and then just let them go crazy. I mean, we all know that's not sustainable. So those narratives and the whole approach to the development is explaining that you really know how to serve this population. Outcomes, this is really what I was talking about in the last 18 months. You just have a way, I think a lot of the 202 use Service Track or some version of a electronic medical system that tracks your daily living activities. You'll need to kind of pull that data for the narratives. Here's an example of one of the ones that we track. Psychiatric hospitalizations, medical, increased income, those types of things. Land, again, it goes back to those kind of narratives. I mean, in my experience, the for-profit has brought the land to us. We don't have many properties that are large enough besides the one that our national organization owns and we manage that are eligible for preservation or 4%. So but you really have to have a great piece of land. And then we all know with great pieces of land comes NIMBYism. So just be prepared for that. Nonprofits are pretty used to that. Co-developer, obviously we've talked a lot about this. For us, VOA of Florida, I mean, we don't have all this, treasure chest of money sitting away. So you really, financial guarantees is a big reason. Our St. Pete one, we did the financial guarantees ourselves as a nonprofit, and we used a consultant. But again, we won't be able to do that to 2 of them. So it's kind of maxed out our ability. But you do have to realize, even when you partner with a for-profit, there's a chance that you will, it will show up as at least a construction loan, a contingent liability on your audit. So, and then again, the tax credit experience, you can't jump in this without somebody, either for-profit, co-developer, or consultant. So here's just an example of our Innovare project. We use Gorman and Company as our consultant, co-developer. They're not taking any guarantees, but they partnered with us. And then Raymond James is our tax credit syndicator, and they've been amazing. They are very familiar with permanent supportive housing deals. TD Bank's got our construction loan. And then we actually found we had the land locked up. We found a nonprofit partner to sell us the land. So it's a complicated financial structure, but again, the legal team can help you navigate that. Some kind of lessons learned, picking the right co-developer. I mean, you're going to probably work with a for-profit one. There's not very many of the nonprofits that live in this space. Make sure what the for-profit wants. You want both sides to be happy. So just make sure you know what they want and make sure that you're both happy. And, you really need a partner that has a similar mission. Have fun with this. It's going to be stressful. So if you can't even get along with your partner, that's not a good sign. I'd say if you have some bad feelings in the beginning, get out. And then obviously pick the best financial return, because the people we serve don't usually have much revenue. And then trust. Do they respect you? Do you respect them? Word of mouth is huge. You heard it here from a lot of us have worked together. Go look at their past developments, some of the ones that are maybe a little bit older, see how they take care of them. And then is the land, in a good location. For the co-developer real quick. So, again, I'd said Gorman, they're out of Wisconsin. We had a previous connection to them through our national organization, Acruva. We've used them. We had a past relationship with them when one of their principals was at McCormick Barron. We did a deal with them in Miami. So we had an existing relationship with them. Smith and Hensey, Darren, through his connection to and recommendation from Juana and his involvement in Leading Age. And then the other one that we do is VOA National, is our national organization, our big brother that, we sometimes partner with if they don't beat up on us too bad. But we have for-profits come to us very often, and we just passed up one that was out of New York City, and you can tell pretty quickly if they're just trying to use your nonprofit status. We had a group out of Miami that came to us, and you could tell they were like a 10-minute conversation. They were like, "All right, we're ready to roll with you," and then we found out that they just needed a nonprofit to get access to some grant money. So. Again, you just have to, don't jump into this. You need to be planning this 2 years before, if possible. You don't want to wait to the last minute. Nonprofits, again, have grants that they can access. And we know, the local market for those narratives. We have grant writing experience. And then again, I think you heard this from a lot of people. The industry, Florida Housing wants more nonprofits to get involved, and the industry is not in the business to put nonprofits out of business. They really want to help to succeed. Some quick lessons learned: you got to get it in writing. I would put that in this whole thing, this whole presentation. Get it in writing. Get it in writing and early. You all talk verbally, and then you get too far into this. Get it in writing, even if it's in an MOU. Work out all those details that Gary kind of went through in your developer fee splits and first right of refusal. Get it all in writing way early, because again, everything's happy in the beginning and then gets stressful when it gets further in. So again, I said if things are bad in the beginning, get out, and then plan to spend 20K at least with attorneys, just throughout this process to do your homework. So I hope I didn't miss anything, but thanks again for letting me share some of the trauma and some of the excitement we have on these developments we've done in the last 10 years.
Thank you so much, Travis, and thank you to all of our panelists today and to our audience that faithfully remain and stay with us, even that we are over time. That shows you how important is this topic and how hungry we are for it. So we have a great question. If the presenter's information will be shared, and yes, I'm sure, I'm positive that Rhonda will be kind enough to share that with all of our attendees so you can have some quality one-on-one time with our presenters. We really hope that we inspire you enough to embark in the tax credits world. It's much needed, and don't be afraid for it, because Leading Edge Florida will be here for you, and the rest of us will be as well. So Rhonda, do you have any final thoughts or any other information that we need to share?
First and foremost, a personal thank you to each one of you. Your knowledge is just irreplaceable, and the time that you have taken to put together such valuable information there's just not words for how grateful I am, and I know all the attendees are as well. To the attendees, I want to remind you that there will be a brief survey that will take you about 60 seconds to fill out. We really do read them, so please be honest and give us good feedback. And I just want to extend my appreciation to everyone who has joined us today. I think this was some of the best 2 hours I have personally spent, and I've already heard their presentation several times, and I was still on the edge of my seat with the information. So if any of the panelists have any closing words, I'll open it up, but otherwise we will conclude. Thanks everybody for sticking with us.
Thank you for everybody that joined.
Thank
us.
you.
Take care.
All right, I'm going to close it out. Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.